See if you can bring him up here. There you go. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry, Marcus.
That's okay, yeah.
Very good. What'd you make of Tanner Manning yesterday?
Well, I got to say, he looked better than Eli and Peyton Manning in their first game. Maybe he's the missing link, Maybe he's the chosen one. No, he was really good. I love the nickname. It's a great nickname. The Mormon Missile, Ginger Jesus and Mormon Missile. I'm gonna wear those out. You can put those on my tombstone. Carson Wentz, and I hope Tanner has a better run than Carson did, especially at the end. But no, he looks like the real deal. I mean, Kenny Pickett looked good.
Yep.
Maybe it is a quarterback factory.
How about this too, Marcus? I think that goes to the player development of the organization too. I mean, you know what? I love what I hear every time I hear Jeff Stoutland say that he gives the third-team offensive lineman opportunities at reps. And I think this was, as I said, an organizational win yesterday, and it showed you the player development. I mean, look, Ojimo was good. I mean, Booker has been a factor this year as a backup. I mean, I'm a little bit suspect on what they did with their pass rushing this year, but they really did a nice job, man. I mean, and then what I was taken by was Jahan Dotson actually looked like something. Now it's a different role, right? Instead of being in the 3 hole, he's in the 1 hole, so you're going to get more premium targets when you're in that 1 hole versus the 3 hole. He had 12 targets or 12 receptions going into this game, but I mean, I thought the offense looked a lot better when it came to spreading the ball around, and these guys were all backups in 2s and 3s. Do you feel Kellen Moore, that's the kind of quarterback that he fits more to his style of play calling than a dual threat guy like Hurts?
Well, let's be clear. No dual threat guy fits to anybody's sort of play calling. Quarterbacks run because of necessity. They would leave them all in the pocket if they could. Jalen Hurts is hurt for the 5th year in a row because he runs too much. Doug Peterson might have gotten fired because Trevor Lawrence got knocked out in the middle of the season during a run, an illegal slide and an illegal hit. So, I mean, I covered the league probably for 4 or 5 years before I got to Philly, but not the way I covered it when I got to Philly. So when I got to Philly, Ricky Waters had just landed here, and you didn't need to teach Ricky Waters anything. But what they did successively is they would replace their franchise running back. So Deuce Staley replaced Ricky Waters. And I believe Brian Westbrook replaced Deuce Staley. And I think there might have even been some overlap between LaShawn McCoy and Brian Westbrook. Maybe not. I'm not sure. But their running backs coach at that point was a guy named Ted Williams, believe it or not, who and Ted explained to me. So I wrote many stories about Ted being such a good finder of talent, because none of those guys are first-round guys, and developer of talent. He says, thank you very much. But what happens with this group of people is that Ricky tutored Deuce, who tutored Westbrook, who I think might have tutored Shady, So you've had what I'm saying is it's always better when the knowledge is passed from player to player than from coach to player. So I think what you have right now, this digression here, I think what you have right now is 2 elite receivers in Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown not being threatened by Jahan Dotson and mentoring him. You have elite defensive linemen last year, especially with Fletcher Cox, and this year with Brandon Graham and Josh Sweat and Bryce Huff, who's an elite pass rusher at some point, mentoring these young defensive linemen. So and no one has surprised me more with their mentorship than Darius Slay and C.J. Gardner-Johnson. These guys know what they're doing. So I don't mean to diminish the player development that you're talking about or the assistant coaches, but it always works better when the old guys teach the young guys.
It does.
And it's rare. It's rare, but that culture sort of came to fruition under Ray Rhodes. Ray Rhodes was a player. Emmett Thomas, the defensive coordinator, was an elite player, Hall of Fame caliber player. And they told the old guys, we will win more if you mentor the old guys. And the first time that happened, the first time we saw it manifest itself was even before Deuce Staley, when Troy Vincent mentored Bobby Taylor. So I think you had that dynamic in this organization from a long time ago. You know, Doug Peterson was brought here as a player to mentor Donovan McNabb. Mentorship is huge, and I think that's what you're seeing right now.
I really liked it too. I got to tell you, I mean, I really did here. All right, Marcus, how do you feel about the team heading into the postseason right now? I mean, the quarterback, obviously, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, as we're talking right now, I believe ESPN has reported that he's out of concussion protocol now. He's missed about 3.5 weeks of football. So you tell me, I mean, the passing game is with Jalen Hurts heading into this Green Bay game. How do you feel about the team overall heading into that game?
Well, I'm not sure he can be out of concussion protocol.
Until Wednesday?
Well, the last hurdle in concussion protocol, and I've researched this because there's a column up on Inquirer.com right now. And I didn't help formulate this formula, but going through the years, starting with the Westbrook concussions, I became Mr. Concussion guy. So I'm pretty sure that this is accurate. He has to go through a full contact practice, and I know there's no such thing as a contact practice for a quarterback, but he has to go through a regular practice and report healthy the next day. We know he didn't do that last week. We know that Wednesday, Thursday, whenever they practice, he didn't do that because we were told he remains in concussion protocol. That's step 5, okay? There hasn't been an opportunity for him to go through step 5 yet. So I don't know what the ESPN report is. I was checking Twitter before I went on because, you go on these shows, you want to be as current as possible, right? And I didn't see that. I don't know what the report entails. They may expect him to clear concussion protocol, but I don't know that it's possible that he's done that. That said, I mean, we're sort of splitting hairs here. It's wasting time. It's the best news possible. If he is cleared, then, I would expect them to look good going into Detroit. If I'm I would make reservations for an NFC Championship game in Detroit.
Huh. Wow. Okay. What did you feel about seeing Saquon Barkley on the sidelines there, not going for the record? And then let me put a spin on this here for you, and I'm probably polluting the question here and leading the witness, so to speak, here on this. But I watched Dan Campbell on Monday playing a football game that was completely meaningless in a San Francisco game. He loses that game, it doesn't matter because home field would have still been for the on Sunday night between the Vikings. That team just played tough. They just look like they're coached tough. They just look like they play tough. They look like they have no precaution. This is what I heard last week. Well, we don't want to get anybody hurt. We're resting our players. We're cognizant of that, and we want to make sure we're healthy going into the playoffs. Dan Campbell's asked that same question. He's like, we're not doing any of that. We're going full metal and full gas pedal down and let the chips fall where they may. It just seems to me anything in life worth going for, especially a championship, comes with risk. I don't think you can have 1 foot on the beach and 1 foot in the ocean and say you're all in and you're going for a championship. Marcus, I think it's a mentality that looks different in Detroit than what looks in Philadelphia. Is it hyperbole what I'm giving you right here a little bit, or do you think there's something to that just in the style of way they're prepared and coached?
I mean, Andy Reid didn't play his starters. Andy Reid has 3 Super Bowls. How many does Dan Campbell have?
None.
Let's talk about Dan Campbell, all right? Who's made more big mistakes in the last 3 years than Dan Campbell? I mean, he's not the I mean, I understand the affinity for Dan Campbell, but yeah, he's hyperbole. He's done nothing. He's failed with aces in his hand, okay? And, being around the league, it was wonderful to hear all the support Saquon Barkley got from his teammates. I didn't believe any of it. No, it was 20 degrees wind chill factor on the field yesterday. You really think A.J. Brown wanted to be on that field? Did you see him napping on the bench?
Yes.
I mean, you really think Lane Johnson wanted to be on that field?
No.
Now, Jordan Mailata is a rugby player. He might have wanted to be on the field, okay? And young guys generally don't care that much, but they already played a season. They played 16 games. The 17th game shouldn't exist anyway. playing a 17th meaningless game. I mean, I don't know if you remember, last year, the Eagles were in the same situation as the
Cowboys.
No.
Because it was for the division title at the end of the year.
No. The last year's Eagles situation was the same as this year's Green Bay Packers situation. They were playing for a better seed.
Okay.
And the Eagles quarterback got hurt. He dislocated his finger. The safety got hurt, and A.J. Brown got hurt. Now, that's almost exactly what happened with Green Bay. They lost a receiver, not their top receiver, but a receiver, and their quarterback left the game, did not return, and caught the coach in a lie. Matt LaFleur said he could have come back, and Jordan Love said, I didn't get any better during the game. I expect to play next week. I didn't get any better. So we're not talking about a meaningless game. We're talking about a slightly meaningful game. Last year, I wrote before that game that it's utter malpractice to think about playing these guys in a game that would just alter the opponent. You're going to be on the road anyway in the playoffs. The reward is you get a week off. You get a bye. Or you get one better slot. You're not playing. I mean, it's not apples to apples because there was a scenario in which the Eagles could have, gotten a home game, but the Packers couldn't. It was just dumb. It was absolute malpractice. And I didn't wish any ill on the Eagles, but you're going to tell me that a team that is a little bit better rested with a quarterback without a dislocated finger and his star receiver and the safety doesn't have a better chance in Tampa the next week? What are we talking about here?
No,
I mean, it's just no. I mean, there is no scenario in which any significant NFL player should play in a meaningless game. That includes those meaningless games that guys were playing in to finish up like Seattle had a meaningless game yesterday. Now Geno made $6 million, playing with the starters, But what if Geno, Brock Purdy's himself? God bless him. Good. I'm glad he didn't get hurt. I'm glad it worked out or whatever. But and more than anything else, Dan, they hadn't had a week off in 12 weeks.
Yes, it's week 5.
Nick sitting his Eagles starters, the preponderance of his Eagles starters, eliminated the bye. So they have just as much time off now as the Lions. They got a week off. The Lions get a week off. The Lions could have gotten 2 weeks off. But Dan Campbell's ego is too big to allow his team to have 2 weeks off in a 3-week period at the end of a grueling season. Because the Lions effectively could have had a bye last week and then won this week's game, then had a bye next week.
Maybe I'm more on how they got there than what they did. Go with me on this here. I mean, you don't really believe Nick Sirianni made that call. There's no question the owner made that call. And so the owner is telling the head coach what's in the best interest of his team. Because to me, I would think that a coach, when it's talking about NFL history, we're not talking just about some novelty record here. We're talking about something that is one of the gold standards in the NFL about making history. And to me too, Marcus, this is where I sat on. I go, he's not going to the Hall of Fame. But you know what would look good on his resume? He was the all-time single-season record holder. He was a Super Bowl champion. He's in the conversation for MVP. Players care about resumes. Your resume is going to get you into the Hall of Fame. I mean, half the Hall of Fame doesn't have Super Bowl rings. So, I mean, players look at that stuff. They care about Pro Bowl, so they wouldn't put them in the contracts as incentives. Okay, I mean, so I don't know. I just had a problem with the owner parachuting in and telling us, well, the players, because the players probably want. I do think that if you really thought about it, though, isn't that a testament for Jeff Stoutland, what the offensive line did? The most memorable team in history of Eagle football is Gang Green. The 2017 team is the most accomplished team. People look at that team and they still reference the Buddy. I see more Buddy Ryan player jerseys in the fans. in the stands at Lincoln Financial than I do any recent players. Am I off? Am I just thinking too much like a player here?
Well, I mean, I'm there every week, and what you just said isn't accurate. I mean, there are some Reggie jerseys, there are some Jerome Brown jerseys, there's a few Randalls, but there's nothing like, Jalen Hurts is all over the place. I mean, and the same was true with Carson Wentz. When Carson was here, it's remarkable, and it's remarkable to me, too, because those were when I was a young man, those were the teams that I was in Philadelphia, but Randall Cunningham was my favorite player. Reggie White's, to me, the best defensive football player in history. So those guys are important to me, too. And nostalgia can be a wonderful thing, but it can also be it can be a misleading thing. And, there's no statue of Reggie. There's no statue of Buddy. There's a statue of Nick and Doug because they won. And trust me, there's so much love. Seth Joyner has an entire career off that era, right?
Yeah.
But, you don't think Nick Foles could have a better career? You don't think Doug's not going to be a talking head? I mean, the 2017 team wasn't just special. It was like being a part of a movie. It was like being part of Rocky with the parade and the dog masks and all that. So, no, I mean, I'm not a big records guy. I'm not a big individual achievement guy. I mean, the best tackle in football this year is Jordan Mailata. He missed 4 games. He played 12 games. Maybe that was part of the Pro Bowl snub, but he was better than everybody else on the offensive line. He didn't go. So these things are flawed, And I think it's as remarkable that he gained 2,000 yards in this era of quarterback, and running backs making, probably 75% of what they're worth.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's as remarkable as the rushing record. But I got to tell you, most football fans don't know what the records are. It's not like baseball. Most football fans aren't like you. Most football fans are very casual fans. That's why football is so popular, because it's so easy to watch, right? It's so easy to digest. Most football fans don't know who Eric Dickerson played for that year, because most football fans aren't that old.
Huh.
So the records are wonderful, but most people didn't know Eric Dickerson had the record. The hardcore fans did. My wife didn't. She's a football fan. So the records are important to the football nerds and the hardcore football fans, but they should be coincidental. Joe DiMaggio, when Josh Allen started the game the other day so he could have 102 consecutive starts or whatever, that was garbage. Joe DiMaggio didn't hit 56 games in a row. That wasn't manufactured. You know what I mean? That wasn't like, okay, let's get him another at bat. No. I think Ted Williams hit a home run in his last at bat.
Yep.
That wasn't manufactured, and I know we're talking baseball versus football, but the Strahan record, the sack record, that was manufactured. It was phony, Mike Evans hit an incentive. I think he has 11 1,000 receiving yard seasons.
Ty Rice
he got one yesterday. If he got 1,000 yards, if he went over 1,000 yards yesterday, it was like a $3 million bonus he would hit. He needed 5 catches and 80 some yards, and they sent him back in for a last minute play. If I was the opposition, I'd have quintuple teamed him, because it's a hollow incentive now. I like Mike Evans. It ain't my money. I don't care. And it's not really it's not a record we're going to lavish, great praise about forever. I think Mike Evans is probably underrated, but I guess my point is, no, I'm not a records guy. Winning is the most important thing. It's so hard to win, and so many things have to go well. And the number one thing that has to go well, you can win with a hurt guy in baseball. You can win with a hurt guy in basketball. You can win with 2 hurt guys in hockey, because everybody literally has to play. But you can't win with a hurt star in football. Your quarterback or your feature back or your wide receiver gets hurt, there's no covering that up. It's that was one of the reasons 2017 was so magical, because lo and behold, Jeffrey Lurie overvalued the backup quarterback spot to the point that he had essentially like a half-season starter caliber quarterback, where everybody else had a stopgap, or most teams had a stopgap in Nick Foles. I think they spent something like $12 or $15 million that season because they had to pay Chase Daniels to leave and sign Nick Foles, who was thinking about quitting. So yeah, they paid and that was Jeffrey Lurie's finest hour. It was all him, and it was his idea, and it worked out. But again, when you lose those guys, I don't know if you remember the day Carson got hurt in LA.
Yeah,
people
it was in LA. Yeah,
people were crying in Philadelphia because they thought the run was over. How much do you think they'd have been crying this morning if Saquon had gotten hurt yesterday?
Yeah, and they were 11-2 when he got hurt at the Coliseum, and I remember I was like, that guy was playing. I thought he was the next coming of Brett Favre the way he played that year. I couldn't believe the things. And if I'm not mistaken, this guy had like a John Wayne exit to the game. He ended up scoring, and then he walked off the game limping, and he walked into the tunnel. I'm like, holy cow, that guy's John Wayne and all. Maybe what I do, Marcus, is like you said, you mentioned the 56-game hit streak by DiMaggio that year. Williams hit 401 and didn't win the MVP, and he won the Triple Crown that year. I mean, and he didn't win the most valuable. Maybe what I do is I try to make him look all even, the records, like you say. I mean, hey, 2105. I mean, is that the equivalent of what we see with what Bonds did with 72 home runs, or when we see with 762? I think those are landmarks that, I mean, I remember 755. I watched it that night when Downing threw it to him. I mean, maybe I'm just the biggest nerd. I didn't realize it until you pointed it out to me.
No.
Maybe I'm a nerd.
There's nothing wrong with that. That's without you and your ilk, there's no industry. We're not having this conversation. I don't have this job. That sort of, you guys, people like you are incredibly important, and discussions like this are important. And I am not 100% like anti-record. 5% of me wanted to see him go for it. 5% of me wanted to see how long it would take. 5% of me wanted to see what the fallout would be next week. Assuming nobody got hurt, would they be worn out? Would they be worn out the following week? Would they be toast if they have to go to Detroit or Minnesota? Because we didn't know whether it was Detroit or Minnesota at the time. So, 5% of me wanted to see it, but my job, I was told this by the guys that did it before me, and I've evolved to appreciate it even more. My job is to make sure that all of the pro sports teams do everything they should to win as much as they can. And winning is the most important thing. So record chasing isn't, free agent chasing isn't, drafting isn't. Those things are all important, and they help you get to the end. But whatever helps you win is the most important thing. And I have a reputation in this town of being an anti-analytics guy and an anti-sports science guy, which is hilarious because, in 2003, covering the Phillies, I was one of the few people who read the entire Moneyball book, understood it, and advocated for it. On base percentage, runs scored, things like, less stealing, maybe defense is overrated. All of those things made me stuck in my craw because those are the things I like to see. But the reality is, the smart guys are always going to win. And Howie's a smart guy. Jeffrey's a smart guy. And the reason the ownership and management of this team, Joe Banner was a brilliant guy. He revolutionized how teams are constructed and set the template for how salary caps are manipulated and used and planned. The smart guys win. They don't win it all the time. Every once in a while there comes a Tom Brady or a Patrick Mahomes, but the smart guys hired Andy Reid, who runs Pat Brady, and the Patriots hired Bill James, the analytics guy. So the smart guys win.
It's funny you say that. I remember Joe Madden when I was covering the Rays, and I was working and doing a pre and post game show. I didn't understand that book at all, man. I couldn't understand all those numbers. I went to Miami.
It was a badly written book. I'm reading Ben Hogan's 5 Lessons right now.
Oh, wow.
Written with Herbert Warren Wind.
Yeah.
Right? The greatest golf writer ever.
Absolutely.
Horribly written book. Like, I can't get more than 2 or 3 pages. It's just so badly written, so hyperbolic. And Moneyball was too. The movie was pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, but Moneyball was not well written, and or easy to read, I should say. Easy to understand.
I couldn't.
I lived it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I saw it happen, and, you know, I talked about it with a lot of people, and this question hasn't really been answered. How do you apply it to hockey effectively? Like, you can reverse engineer it with hockey, but it's hard to, like, okay, we're going to get this guy and he's going to do. Hockey's a weird sport. It's so much about, like, spirit and effort and health and things like that. But, you know, football, throwing on first down, baseball, you know, seeing pitches, getting on base, not giving away outs, that sort of thing. Basketball, threes and layups, no long jumpers, things like that. It became, if you were willing to listen and learn and have an open mind, it was there to do that. Now, I said all that to say the smart guys have been very, very successful and will continue to be. And it was the smart move to not play the starters in week 17 for the Eagles. And I really wonder how it will affect Detroit going down the line, because, you know, what if they run out of gas in the NFC Championship game?
Let's move forward here on explain this to me. I do you not agree that what the Eagles envisioned at the beginning of the year is something that they wanted to see that transpired in Baltimore with 4,300 yards, 40 touchdown passes, a prolific running game, instead of 2,903 and 18 touchdowns? It just seemed in Philly, it's more cookie cutter. Baltimore does it. They run the ball and throw it. Detroit does it. They run the ball and throw it. That kid Gibbs looked spectacular last night. I mean, you know what? I'll tell you too, Marcus, I thought he was good coming out of Bama. I didn't think he was that good. That kid is a good-looking talent up there. Now, that O-line helps. Obviously, they got a bunch of Pro Bowlers on that O-line. But didn't you envision it more with the talent to look like what we see in Baltimore? And I happen to think that the style of play, because you just mentioned it about Hurts. Hurts had over 150 carries this year, okay? I think the receivers blocking in the run game, I think it took its toll on those guys, and that's why those guys missed games and were banged up a little bit. And it was kind of like either we throw it or we run it, and predominantly we ran it way more this year. I mean, Barkley has over 340 carries. I mean, didn't you think there'd be more in the passing game instead of the 30th ranked passing game?
Yeah, Jalen hasn't had a very good passing year. Like, he's I don't want to say he's regressed, but he hasn't progressed the way that you think he should. Or maybe defenses have said, hey, you know what? We are not going to let AJ and Devontae and Jalen beat us, and made it a little tougher on him. And here's the thing about Lamar Jackson. He's got a spectacular arm. Like, he looks horrible, but he's got a spectacular arm. He can make throws. He can make throws that Jalen can't make. He's a better all-around athlete. He's a better all-around quarterback. That is not to denigrate Jalen.
No.
Lamar's just better. So's Patrick Mahomes, okay? So's Josh Allen. They're just better, you know? And my favorite guy to watch is Justin Herbert, but he's not a running guy. But no, I mean, Jaden Daniels is probably better than more talented than Jalen. You know, he's got a long road to go to get to where Jalen, you know, to not lose games the way Jalen doesn't lose games. But no, I mean, I'm a little surprised that Jalen was as gun-shy as he was for the totality of the season. I'm a little surprised it took A.J. Brown stepping forward and saying the quarterback needs to throw the ball, period, and throw it better, period. But winning's intoxicating. It's really hard to go away from something that's working. And let's remember, I want to say through that Cleveland game, so 5 games in, they're 3-2, the team wasn't quite right. You know, Lane Johnson had a concussion. AJ missed time. Devontae missed time. So you didn't have all the weapons. And yeah, if you're a $255 million quarterback, maybe you shouldn't need every single weapon. But if you're Jalen Hurts, you do. To sort of like be willing to make the tough throw, be willing to make the dangerous throw. And also, 5 games in, we didn't know that this defense was good, bad, or indifferent. So there was no safety net. So every turnover, and Jalen was leading the league in turnovers from the beginning of 2023 through 5 games of this season. He was leading the entire league in turnovers. Every turnover was magnified because the defense wasn't holding. Well, the defense started holding, and the guys came back. AJ said what he said, and I believe that had Jalen played the last couple of weeks, you'd have seen a 300-yard passing game. You'd have seen, a 4 touchdown passing game, things like that. He's not a bad quarterback. He's not a bad player, and he's not a 2,600-yard quarterback. He's about a 3,800 passing yard quarterback. If he goes over 4,000 with a weapon like Saquon Barkley and a defense like this, it would surprise me, because that's just not kind of isn't who he is. Lamar's special. Lamar is, having the opportunity to watch Lamar and Patrick Mahomes every season in their prime for 4 years before this, and probably for a 10-year period, 6 years from here, is absolutely wonderful. And I feel bad for John Harbaugh because and Lamar, because they're in the same division as the only quarterback and coach better than them. Not the same division, the same conference. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get that here. All right, listen, I'd be remiss. This was the funniest thing going on last week. So the Inquirer posts a story. I got Angelo Cataldi on the air. We're barking it. We're watching this whole thing play out in front of us here, Marcus. I mean, I went like this. I go, hey, wait a minute here. So wait, I looked at it like this. Well, if the Inquirer's posted a story we're talking about, I feel that's a merit badge for Big Sills. I'm good with that they're doing this here. And then I hear Angelo say this about this ownership here. So this is, and I'm gonna, you explain this one to me here. So Angelo goes like this. He goes, no, what was happening was that Brandon Graham was talking about the relationship between A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts, and he was saying that it was fractured, that these guys, and all of a sudden, the owner got wind of it, probably through Bob Lang, the PR guy, and rifled a note over to him. From what I'm understanding, that's what Angelo seems to think, that there was a text message. He gets on, he starts listening, get that guy out of here and get him off the air right now. And what Howard did was, now Howard's got some dents in the fender, so anytime he does anything right now, he's always got to be cognizant. I always tell young broadcasters, never touch anybody. You'll never have to worry about anything. And so he went over, he was with this one executive there at WIP, and she didn't like the fact that he was kind of being aggressive with her. And the whole thing unfolded 11 days later. On December 23rd, Angelo came on and said that he was asked to step away. This wasn't a retirement. So we had reported that on the 23rd. We didn't know what it was, though. I had no idea what it was, because Angelo didn't want to go into it yet, because I don't think Howard had said anything to him. I talked to Howard, and Howard's going to come on the program when things settle down. He told me yesterday morning. But what do you make of the owner getting and having an ass over the fact that one of his players, the Walter Payton Man of the Year candidate, either this happened, Marcus, either BG's lying, either BG's lying about the relationship between the quarterback and the wide receiver. And here's the owner again. First, he's saying, okay, like you said, and I understand completely what your position is. We're not going for the record. Hey, by the way, get that guy off the air. I mean, this guy seems awful involved on a day-to-day operation on what's going on with that franchise. He looks like he's knee-deep in everything.
Listen, this is not news. All right?
It's news to me, okay.
No, it's not. One of the big issues from the 90s, if you remember, one of the big complaints from the 90s is that Jeffrey Lurie and Joe Banner were meddling with the operations of the football team. The coaches and front office believe that there should be separation. Joe can run the money. Joe was the executive vice president. I think that was his title at that point. And Jeffrey's the owner. And they were usurpers. They'd only been there 3 years. They had no NFL background. They had no football background. They were just money guys, super fans, wanting to play in the sandbox with the big boys. And we were used to Jerry Jones, former player, all these, whatever. They have been involved in every big decision since at least since they drafted Donovan McNabb, which they were involved with. Joe Banner and Jeffrey Lurie went to the Senior Bowl in the 90s and stood on the field as the players were being evaluated. Okay, so if you don't like it, which I'm not telling you gotta, but it's 30 years. The other owners weren't going to wearing LL Bean rain boots so the fields at Mobile wouldn't ruin their shoes and watching the offensive and defensive linemen go one-on-one. Jeffrey Lurie and Joe Banner were. Okay, so every decision that's been made since they hired Andy Reid and drafted Donovan McNabb, they've been involved in. So the instances that you're talking about now, the radio show, Brandon Graham has a handler. Somebody is assigned to Brandon Graham, and he's supposed to report what Brandon Graham is doing or not doing if there's anything to report, and take care of him if he needs to be taken care of.
Yeah.
Right? So Brandon Graham starts telling the truth about AJ and Jalen. And again, I thought that it was interesting that they had to sort of modify Brandon's truth, that they weren't as close as they used to be, because who is? Relationships don't stay static.
That's right.
But that's tangential. It would be remarkable. Nothing Brandon Graham has said on that show, the Eagles don't know about. Nothing. Zero things. Nothing any of them says anywhere the Eagles don't know about. That's part of the job as the PR staff, to understand what these guys are saying and doing on their, Slay's podcast and, whatever, to understand what they're doing so they know what they have to contain, what they have to refute, what they have to deal with inside and outside. That's part of the job now. That's why there's, 8 people in PR where there used to be 2 and an intern, right? So, they're involved in everything and have been for a long, long time. Explain to me why Jeffrey Lurie needed to go on the Jared Goff, Carson Wentz evaluation trip. Do you remember Jeffrey Lurie?
Yes, I do.
Went there in 2016-17. He traveled with, Howie Roseman and the coaches to meet Carson Wentz and Jared Goff. That's how the team is run. So you may be astonished because you cover the league. You may be surprised or astonished that they are that involved and that invested and that manipulative. They try to be in that controlling. But that's who they are. That's who they've always been. That's who they've been really for the last 25, 27 years.
Couple more for you here. That's why I call them this. I think they're a winning franchise, but I don't think they're a championship franchise. And I'll tell you why. Don't good people hire people and have trust in people? I mean, Bob Kraft got in the way when he had the Spygate, the Flakegate. He didn't get in the way of Bill Parcells and Nick Caserio and those guys when it came to decision-making, except for one.
Big difference.
With the Garoppolo.
Bob Kraft has other stuff to do.
Oh, okay. So this is a centric thing for Jeffrey.
Jeffrey goes to the facility every day.
Okay.
And that's his deal. That's his prerogative. Jeffrey and Jerry aren't that different.
And this is probably, like we've said before, this goes on in a lot of places around the National Football League because it's protecting the brand.
Well, more so than we think. It's really a lot of fun to be an NFL owner because you only have to sort of show up and do anything. If you hire well, you only kind of have to show up and do anything at the meetings and at the games. But you get to be an NFL owner and you get to be on the sideline. You get to people looking at you in the box and things like that. It's way harder being an owner in all the other sports. God bless John Middleton. Nobody works harder than him. He goes in the stands every day. He goes in the stands every game with the Phillies, spring training games and regular season games. So,
wow, he's
yeah,
in Clearwater. He's down there in Clearwater in the stands.
Yeah.
That's great.
No, he's not. You want to see John Middleton in Clearwater? Go to the tiki bar after the game. He's not a big drinker, but he thinks it's part of his job to thank the people for coming and, thank you for your patronage. You have any questions? I disagree about that. He's very, very accessible, but I digress. Yeah, I mean, Jeffrey is, for better or worse, very, very involved. And they have a championship. They've been to the Super Bowl twice. And most other owners, I mean, you can say Jerry's not a champion, hasn't built a championship culture. He won 3. I mean, there's lots of ways to.
Yeah, well, I'm jaded. Jimmy won 3. Okay, but okay, he's the owner. I get it.
Who hired Jimmy?
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
I mean, the Clapper and Mike McCarthy. You're not going to ever convince me that those were good hires or guys to retain. And, let's be honest, he might rehire Mike McCarthy. He might extend Mike McCarthy, which would be, a huge boon to the Washington Commanders and the Philadelphia Eagles, who play in the same division as the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants. I think you were talking about that earlier when we were trying to connect about how, Brian Daboll is going to survive. And, Brian Daboll, who was given a franchise quarterback and extended, and Saquon Barkley, and couldn't do anything, So, yeah, I mean, I think that the Eagles, I think Jeffrey Lurie would rather lose the way that he wants to comport himself than win some other way, distancing himself. And I guess that's his prerogative, right?
Yeah. It absolutely is. Finally here, Angelo said something on Friday about Howie. Tell me if you agree with this. At the end of the 2025 season, Nick's deal's up too. Howie Roseman's contract is up at the end of 2025. And I asked the question, do you believe that Howie Roseman will be extended in the offseason? And then I also added the question to Angelo, well, if I'm him, wouldn't you want to be, and let's bring a baseball reference in here, wouldn't you want to be Theo Epstein and end the curse of the babe, or go to Chicago and have statues and children crying in Chicago that he brought championships? Why not go to New York with the Jets, the job that he always coveted when he was a kid, being the general manager? I know Woody is an awful owner. However, get autonomy, have autonomy. I don't know about equity. I doubt you can do that, but something that you have, because Jeffrey gives him the ability, Marcus, because of that bag of money he gives up front to be able to manipulate the salary cap. That's one of the geniuses of it all in those contracts, is that the money's up front instead of promised. I tell people all the time, I'd rather have money in the bank than promised to me. And that's what players want. I don't want something promised. I want it now. And so why not see what your value is, especially if they win a Super Bowl? What would you do, and how do you think the Eagles will operate this? Because obviously he's got to be the most important person in the building.
Well, the quarterback's always the most important person in the building. I would be astonished if Howie strong-armed the Eagles, even if they win a Super Bowl. I don't think he thinks he has that sort of power. I don't think he thinks he has that sort of cachet in the league. He's made a lot of, not enemies, but he's not liked. He's respected and people deal with him, and he's not dishonest or anything like that, but he's not liked. He's a very, very difficult person to work with and for sometimes. Now, I've known Howie since, Joe Banner hired him to be his, gopher. And it's just who he is. And I'm not sure that act works anywhere else. Jeffrey and Howie, Jeffrey everybody's like, Jeffrey, he seems like a son to, he seems like a son to Jeffrey. It's more than that. It's like Jeffrey thinks he created Howie.
Okay.
In reality, Joe Banner created Howie, but Jeffrey thinks he created Joe Banner too. But Jeffrey believes that Howie and he are, shake and bake, right? Laverne and Shirley I think he'd do whatever he had to keep Howie, but I don't think there's going to be any bidding war over Howie Roseman, despite Howie being one of the better general managers of really our lifetime. In a second act. He wasn't great going in. He wasn't great early and he wasn't great in the middle, but his, third edition, the pre-Chip Kelly, during Chip Kelly, but post-Chip Kelly, he's been much better. And he's had to have like almost a fourth edition because after they won the Super Bowl, there were some pretty low lows. There was an era, there was about a 2-year era where nobody was sure that Howie was going to survive with Doug, if you remember.
Oh.
So it's an interesting case. It's to the point where I don't even think about Howie not being around or not getting extended because he's kind of an institution now. It may be more so than like Mike Tomlin, you know what I mean? Or John Harbaugh. Who, we both remember when these young coaches got their jobs and now they're not so young anymore and they're not winning like they probably should or, their fan bases expect them to, but they're sort of institutions. And I think Howie has become an institution that he's comfortable being and Jeffrey's comfortable having.
Tell you what, man, you can always get it from Marcus Hayes, man. I got a Ricky Bobby reference. And I heard it. Hey, don't think you could slip that by me, man, because that's a movie that should have won the Academy Award in my movie catalog there. I heard a Ricky Bobby reference. I'm like, holy cow, he's not that suave. I got it. Great stuff, Marcus. I thank you so much, man. I appreciate you, man. I thank you for coming on when you always find time for us. Hey, by the way, Joel Embiid, did he get hurt again?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. I thought people were saying in here that Embiid's talking about being injured again. So
he has a new injury that I'm aware of. He has a foot sprain that popped up when he was out west, but he has played, I think, the last 2 games with it. He took a back-to-back, quote-unquote, back-to-back game off with the foot sprain, but it's that's the latest one that I've known of. But we've been on air for 45 minutes. He might have 2 new injuries by now.
I called him a better version of Sam Bowie. People would not know who that is, but it's all good. I mean, Hey, Marcus, thank you so much.
One of the guys drafted in front of Michael Jordan, right?
Yep. Hey, Portland, how you doing? Hey, Marcus, thank you so much, my friend.
All right, Dan, thanks for having me.
You bet. Marcus Hayes from the Philadelphia Inquirer, one of our dear friends. We love him so much, man. Great stuff. Make sure you guys check his work out. Hey, by the way, we're going to catch up with Gary Cobb here in a second. And do not forget also our great friends at BetUS. Make sure during this football season, guys, especially with the NFL playoffs, the bowl games are still out there for the semifinals. The YouTube 150 with our friends at BetUS. You bet. YouTube 150, sign-up bonuses up to $2K. The second and third are 125%. And if you're into crypto, that's 200%. All you do is log on to betus.com.pa. That's betus.com.pa. Fastest payouts in the business. 24/7 personalized service, 365 days of the year. Live wagering on all major games. Go to betus.com.pa. That's betus.com.pa. And do me a favor. Tell them Big Sil sent you.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.